Those are law enforcement officers being physically attacked. By this standard, would any of those officers be justified in shooting and killing the people causing them physical harm?
Every single situation is going to rely on the situation those officers are on. But they know that when people are putting hands on them, when they are using weapons against them, when they are physically harming them, that they have the authority to arrest those individuals.
The president pardoned every single one of those people.
And make sure that they're getting justice for their actions going forward.
President Trump pardoned every single one of those people.
And every single one of these investigations comes in the full context of the situation on the ground.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem pressed yesterday on the apparent double standard for Capitol Police officers during the January 6th riot and ICE agents currently on the ground
she says
in U.S. cities.
It depends on the situation on the ground. Well, does that mean it's okay if police officers have the hell beaten out of them because they buy into a bullshit conspiracy theory? I don't see that in police regulations. I don't see that in ICE regulations. I don't see that in any regulations in Washington, D.C. But people that were beating the hell out of police officers, people who were found guilty by a jury of their peers for beating the hell out of police officers on January 6th, pardoned.
Noem is now sending more federal officers to Minneapolis as protests continue there in response to the deadly shooting of Renee Good last week by an ICE agent. And while the Trump administration is trying to crack down on protests at home, President Trump is showing support for demonstrators in the Middle East amid growing unrest across Iran. Meanwhile, the president says he may block ExxonMobil from operations in Venezuela after the company's CEO called the country, quote, uninvestable.
Now, where did we hear that before? We heard it last week. David Ignatius reporting the day after that at least right now it is uninvestable because it's too dangerous and it's going to take a while to bring stability to the country. And when stability comes to the country, then they'll send oil executives down there, but they don't want their oil executives beaten up. They don't want their families, if they go down, or other people kidnapped by motorcycle gangs that are in the streets right now. I mean, there's been a warning sent, Mika, over the weekend that if you're an American, watch out, get out of Venezuela because they're coming for you. So why would an oil company, which again, at some point, I mean, they want money. They're in it for the money. They're in it for the bottom line. They just understand that if America's telling Americans, the American government, that you need to get out of Venezuela, why would they send their people into Venezuela right now? It's going to take a while.
Uninvestable. It comes as he continues to talk about taking control of Greenland one way or another, despite warnings on what that could mean for the future of the NATO partnership. Plus, federal prosecutors have opened an investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell. We'll show you how he responded. A lot going on this Monday morning, and with us we have for it staff writer at The Atlantic, Frank Foer, CEO and co-founder of Axios, Jim Vandehei. Good to have you both. Let's get right to it. Thousands of people, both in Minneapolis and across the country, hit the streets to protest the recent deadly ICE activity. Nearly every major city saw demonstrations marching in opposition of the immigration crackdown and the death of Renee Nicole Good last week. The progressive organization Indivisible said there were more than 1,000 planned events scheduled over the weekend. In Minneapolis, police said more than 24 people were detained after a Friday night protest. Most were cited and later released. Meanwhile, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says hundreds of federal officers are being deployed to Minneapolis. Some of the officers arrived yesterday. Others will be there today. Noem told Fox News the extra reinforcements are needed to support ICE and Border Patrol operations. She also defended her statements about the ICE agent who shot and killed Renee Good last week.
If they conduct violent activities against law enforcement, if they impede our operations, that's a crime, and we will hold them accountable to those consequences. I'll remind everyone, Maria, that every single thing that I've said has been factual about what's been going on in Minneapolis, what's been going on in Minnesota, and with the incident that we had where we had a tragic loss of life.
When you lie about your lies, and this is a trick that over the past 10 years, as we've gotten into this new Orwellian sort of sense thing, you'll have podcasts saying, here comes the most honest person of all time, or here comes the greatest historian of all time. And then they'll say that, like, World War II was Churchill's fault. Or they'll say, this is the most honest person I've ever seen in the world, or everything I say is true. Kristi Noem right there, Frank Foer, says, everything I have said about ICE and everything, she says it's true. No, it's just the opposite. You go back to her cowboy hat press conference, everything she said was a lie. Absolutely everything. And while we're looking at the head of DHS, a couple of things for President Trump to keep in mind while looking at the person who is running this agency into the ground and running his numbers down on the issue of immigration. Approval of Kristi Noem's ICE itself has plummeted 30 percentage points since she took control. I read it in Axios, so I know it's true. It's a YouGov poll, and more than half of Americans, 54%, say ICE's tactics are too extreme, and only about 25% support the tactics. Frank Foer, Americans are seeing their streets occupied, and they're seeing it's so crazy after you have the Secretary of Defense, and yes, that's what it's called, Secretary of Defense, talking about, quote, fat officers and fat members of the military. How ironic that we see all of these fat, out of shape people that they push through, right? And in how long? Instead of 5 months, they have these shortened training sessions. So they go out there and they're ill-equipped to handle what professional law enforcement officers, the NYPD or the LAPD or any of our law enforcement agencies are equipped to do. And suddenly, tragedy is unfolding on the streets. But we all predicted this was going to happen. We all said, these guys are untrained. They're out of shape. They don't know the basics of law enforcement. Tragedy is going to strike. And sure enough, it's striking. And ICE's numbers are plummeting. Donald Trump's, the Wall Street Journal said it last week, even on the one issue that he's always been strong on, immigration, those numbers are plummeting. Why? Not because of the southern border, because the southern border is like sealed off. It's because of what Kristi Noem is doing with ICE.
Right. You have these paramilitary squads being parachuted into cities where they're not welcome. They don't have any of the training that a conventional police officer would have about interacting with the community. They feel besieged. They've been allowed to operate with this alternative set of rules where their faces are covered. They're operating in these vehicles that are stealth and are intended to blend in, and they feel as if the community around them is hostile to them, which in fact it is hostile to them. And it's a terrible cocktail where you have police officers who aren't up to the job being thrust into an impossible situation where they have infinite authority and are suddenly confronting huge numbers of citizens who aren't comfortable with the presence of this alien force operating in their streets. It is something that I think you could only say has been designed to induce the sort of confrontations that we're seeing right now in Minneapolis.
Well, and Mika, pre-Kristi Noem, the ICE professionals at work, they did it along the border for the most part.
Well, they're border agents.
They're not urban.
That's the training.
They're not trained to engage in what's happening. Now, the NYPD, they know how to do that.
Right.
They're extraordinarily professional. You look at the LAPD, you look at other police, they're used to that. That's what they're trained for. Under Kristi Noem, she has put all of these people that are grossly ill-equipped to do this. New recruits that had a really shortened training time.
And they're breaking protocol right and left. They're breaking procedure right and left. I mean, if you, the much talked about video where everyone's looking at the shots and what the angle was, which is absolutely legitimate to look at. I mean, from the beginning, the ICE agent is walking in front of the car. You don't do that. The ICE agent is shooting at the car. You don't do that. And then
Wait, hold on. He's carrying a phone.
He's holding his phone. What ICE agent is fumbling with his phone and a weapon? Like, what are you doing? Your family videos along with a weapon? It's nuts.
Nobody does this. And you look at the shots that are up there. There are the first shot. His feet are to the side of the car. I'm sorry for people that don't like the truth and you want to watch shows that lie to you and want to watch networks that lie to you and want to watch podcasts that lie to you. I'm sorry you don't like the truth. But here are the shots. Much debate over shot number one. What was she trying to do? And the poor fools that sent out the video of his phone thinking it was going to help him, those poor fools have no idea that they just made his case worse. And then look at the second shot. He's at the side of the car, shooting point blank inside of the car. And then the third shot, again, side of the car, extended, shooting right in her window, point blank. Looks like it's directed straight at her head. Now, we could find out which one of those shots, or two of those shots, were the kill shots. I suspect even this officer couldn't have missed from point blank range, aiming straight at her head from the side. That would get any police officer with any investigation in deep, deep trouble. But what's happened here, Mika? What's happened here is the feds have swooped in and basically shut down any real investigations. When you have Kristi Noem off the top saying, oh, she's a domestic terrorist, the same woman that said, hey, I'm not mad at you. Her last words were good. I'm not mad at you. The woman in the video is not screaming. She's not being a radical extremist bent on killing an ICE agent, says Charlie Sykes. Her very last words on this earth were conciliatory, not threatening. That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you. And even when you see her turning her steering wheel sharply to the right to avoid him, look at this. Look, that's what Kristi Noem called a domestic terrorist. Right here. The last seconds of her life, she's sharply turning her steering wheel to the right to avoid the ICE agent, who, of course, is standing to the side of the car now because she's turning sharply to the right.
And slowly.
And slowly. And he shoots her despite the fact she's turning sharply to the right. And then, just for good measure, shoots her at what appears to be at her head at point blank range from the side of the car. When he's at the side of the car, when he's completely out of danger. Completely out of danger. And again, who's justifying this? What ghouls are justifying this? Is that where America is? Because I'll guarantee you this. If there was a 27-year-old Iranian mother that was trying to drive out of an area of protest and a member of Iran's security forces stuck a gun to the side of her car and shot at her head in point blank range? Oh my God. The world would be up in arms. And Donald Trump, as you will see when we play the clip, would use that as justification for invading Iran. But here you actually have people calling this woman a domestic. I mean, who raised you?
Yeah.
I've got to ask that question. Who raised you to celebrate the shooting of a 27-year-old mother whose last words were 37-year-old, whose last words were conciliatory, and who was trying to leave the scene? And not just shooting from the front side of the car, but just for good measure, aiming twice in her window at the side for 2 kill shots. Look at shot 2. Side of the car, leaning in to shoot at her. And then look at shot 3. Again, completely clear of the car, still aiming to shoot at what appears to be her head. A final kill shot? Well, we really wouldn't know, would we? Because the feds have desperately tried to clean this up as quickly as they could.
Taking the investigation.
And taking the investigation away from people who actually might conduct an honest, fair, and straight investigation. Instead of having an investigation done, when you have the secretary who is responsible for this calling her a domestic terrorist and talking about snowbanks, like right after this happened, getting everything wrong. Well, listen, Mika thinks I'm too optimistic. But I do think the wheels of justice do grind finally. And I do think those that are responsible for this killing will ultimately be held accountable in the court of law. I just do. We're still, despite the fact that Kristi Noem thinks that ICE agents can shoot whoever they want to shoot from a side window, that's not what we are at. What she should be doing right now, what Donald Trump should be doing right now, what the administration should be doing right now is saying this guy screwed up. We're going to do, you know what they should do? They should actually do what Tom Homan did. Say, I'm not going to pass any judgment right now.
That would be unprofessional, is what he said.
That would be unprofessional. Let's get the investigation on. And then do an honest and fair and straight investigation. And then after doing that, let the chips fall where they may. And if there was somebody who was untrained, somebody who made a mistake, somebody who made a deadly mistake, well, you actually announced that in your investigation. And I know this is hard for people in the White House to understand. That would actually make people trust you more, that you are an honest and fair broker, instead of lying immediately, talking about snowbanks, talking about people trapped, talking about domestic terrorists for this 37-year-old woman who is being conciliatory until she drew her last breath.
And then